Welcome everyone to the 2022 presidential debate as part of the Iowa State student government elections. My name is Ross Opie. I'm the election commissioner for student government.
And I'm Catherine Keeley, the managing editor of content for the Iowa State Daily.
We would like to thank both the Bryce J. and the Ludwig Ulrich's campaign, as well as the entire election commission and Iowa State Daily for their preparation leading up to tonight's event. The debate structure will be as follows. Each candidate will first have the opportunity to give an opening statement, followed by topical questions for both candidates to answer. We will then go into specific questions for each candidate's platform. At that point, we will take a 10-minute break, and when we resume, we will be asking questions that have been submitted by the student body. For those watching at home, the link to submit your questions is on the Election Commission website under the Debates tab. Also, a QR code will be posted on the live stream during our 10-minute break where you can submit your questions through a Google form. And I believe that Google form is also linked in the description of this live stream right now. At the end of the debate, each candidate will have time to make a closing statement, and that will wrap up our event. So we will now go into opening statements. The candidates will each have 90 seconds to introduce themselves and tell the constituents why they want to be your next student body president, starting with Bryce.
All right, good evening, everyone. First, I want to start off by extending a huge thank you to the Election Commission and for all the hard work you've put into this debate and the whole election process, and then also to the Iowa State Daily for assisting tonight. Most importantly, thank you to all of the students who are here and tuning in tonight and participating in your government. My name is Bryce Garman, and I'm from Algona, Iowa, and I'm currently a junior studying public relations with 2 minors in general business and political science. I currently serve as the Director of Marketing within Student Government Cabinet. What this entails is I manage all of the social media as well as helping the PR team with planning events, and then I also serve as an asset liaison, and I'm the chair of the Campus and Community Commission. When Jay and I sat down and started this journey, we started with our why. Through my role as Director of Marketing throughout this year, I have had the opportunity to work with students and faculty from all around campus. However, student government has not always been a place where every student feels welcome or comfortable enough being a part of, or they simply don't know that student government exists. Jay and I want to cultivate communities of collaboration, togetherness, and opportunities to make sure that every student, no matter who you are, is respected, valued, and has a seat at our table. Thank you.
Jacob.
Service, advocacy, empowerment. That was the 3-word mission statement of student government when I joined a couple of years ago. And those 3 words have guided my actions in this organization since. Whether it was lobbying at the state capitol for medical amnesty so that students would not have to choose between risking their physical health and getting in trouble with the law, or working with the Department of Residence in the wake of racially charged vandalism in the dorms to ensure that students had the support and resources they needed to feel safe and welcome on this campus, or my work with the university administration to keep fees as low as possible and to ensure that every dollar we spend here gets its maximum value, I don't just talk about issues, I've done the work. And I won't stop working to serve, advocate for, and empower the Iowa State community. And tonight, as I stand here and look to the next year, to the challenges ahead of us, an ongoing pandemic, rising food insecurity, a lack of mental health resources, sexual violence in our community, and a dozen others, I see a lot of things that need fixing, a lot of work that needs done. But I also see a lot of reasons for hope, a lot of reasons to believe that if we choose to come together, to back one another, to invest in one another, to empower our fellow students, that we can overcome all of these challenges and more. That's what this campaign is about. My name is Jacob Ludwig, and I'm running for student body president to empower students and to leave this campus better than I found it. Thank you.
Now beginning with questions related to student wellness. According to Thielen Student Health Center, in 2021, student hospitalizations relating to mental health increased 233% compared to the previous year. Considering this dramatic increase, how do you plan to address this issue? Beginning with Jacob.
Right. So, I mean, this has been an ongoing and, growing issue at Iowa State for years, and I think this has to be a multi-pronged approach. We have to increase access to the resources that already exist. So there's things that exist like mental health counseling. We have to get more resources and funding behind that. This year, we're working to get more funding from the state legislature, and that's something I intend to pursue next year, and also working with the university administration to reprioritize some of their budget priorities to make sure that more funding goes to the Student Wellness Division. Additionally, from there, I think, expanding access and awareness of existing resources like the TAO app, which is a free app that any student can use that gives you mental health tips and tricks and how to deal with a mental health crisis on your own, is a great way to give students resources so they can help themselves. We have to pursue this from all angles, and that's what Jaden and I intend to do.
Bryce?
1 in 10 students report not knowing where they should go for support, and I think that is outrageous. We have so many different resources on campus, but the resources aren't, with there being so many, they're not as accessible. It's hard, as 1 in 10 students, they don't know where to go. So I think mental health affects so many different people, whether that be people that are actually struggling with mental health or those that have loved ones, friends who are struggling, and have those people knowing where to go for that help. You know, there's Green Dot training through the university for students to go through to help with, bystander training. We're doing our mental health first aid training. Iowa State Extension Outreach has that. So there's just a lot of resources on campus that aren't as available. So just working with, the PR team and promoting what is available to students so they know exactly where to go.
And as a follow-up, students are only provided 1 free semester of counseling-related services. Does this adequately address the current need for student mental health support? Jacob.
I think the clear answer is no. Obviously, the reason that there is the limit on mental health counseling services right now is because we don't have enough counselors to support an unlimited amount of services. And that's why Jaden and I are really interested in expanding the number of counselors and funding for the counseling program at Iowa State, because we can't possibly tackle the mental health crisis at Iowa State without getting more funding to counseling services.
Bryce?
Yeah, I agree with Jacob. We don't have enough counselors. We have about 13 counselors on staff currently at Iowa State, and there is quite a bit of wait for those counselors that we have for students to get in. Students, when they need a counselor, they don't need to be seen 3 to 5 months in advance. They need to be seen now. So working with the legislative ambassador team and our appointed director of governmental affairs to just continue prioritizing that at the state legislature for expanding funding for more counselors on campus.
In 2021, there were at least 15 reported sexual assaults on the ISU campus. What resources exist on campus to assist sexual assault survivors? Are the current resources enough? And what additional resources could be created to assist sexual assault survivors? Bryce.
Counselors are available for students on campus, but like I said before, we only have about 13 on-staff clinical staff for these students, and that's not enough. So continuing, like I said, advocating at the state legislature for increasing funding to bring more staff on, but also Jay currently serves on the ISU Police Department Chief Advisory Board, so continuing to work with Chief Newton and that advisory board to expanding just education related to sexual violence, whether that be putting on different trainings or informational sessions, working with the student government PR team to continue that information on social media.
Jacob.
Yeah, so the resources that the university provides students right now, there's a pretty wide array, from information about counseling, information about how you can pursue your sexual assault case. There's also connected with local resources through our asset program, like Access, which is a program for victims of violence, domestic violence. And then there's support that ISUPD provides as well. I think that the resources that we have can be improved, and we can always improve access and education about them, because a big problem that with sexual assaults is that a lot of them go unreported. And so we need to make sure there's more education on that. But one thing that Jaden and I really want to focus on is focusing on the prevention side of sexual assault and working with Green Dot to provide more funding for training so that we can prevent these sexual assaults from happening by making sure that bystanders can step in and support our fellow students.
How severe is the issue of racism on Iowa State's campus, and do you believe this issue is especially prevalent at Iowa State compared to other schools? Beginning with Bryce.
I think racism exists no matter where you are, whether that is here at Iowa State University or any university across campus communities. And it's not okay, and I think that there's lots of education, especially, we've been putting on multicultural town halls within student government for this purpose, for multicultural students, people of color, to express, how they're feeling on campus, if they're facing racism and prejudice, and just informing student government members how we can do better, how we can better advocate towards them. I don't know if here on Iowa State it's worse than other places, but I think you're going to have the issue, and it's going to be anywhere in the United States.
Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Iowa State is any worse than anywhere else, but I think there is racism present on our campus, just as there is in almost every community in the United States. There's always going to be people who hold those beliefs, but I think the thing that we can do as a community is educate one another on how to live in a multicultural space, how to accept different cultures and different identities, and how to build an Iowa State that's reflective of everyone who's here. And so I think it is present. I don't know that it's particularly worse, but looking to build a community where everyone has a voice in the decisions that happen, everyone has representation in the bodies that speak for them, I think is a key part of what Jaden and I really want to focus on in the next year, and make sure that Iowa State and student government specifically is an organization that can represent and advocate for all students on campus.
All right, we'll now be moving on to the topic of affordability. Enrollment at Iowa State University peaked in 2016 with over 36,000 students. This year, total enrollment is just over 30,000, which represents a 16.2% reduction. As student enrollment at Iowa State decreases, student government budget will also face tighter budget restraints. Would your campaign support an increase of the student activity and service fee to offset the loss of revenue? Jacob.
No, I think right now is the wrong time to look at increasing the student activity fee. I think we're going to have to take a look at the priorities and funding that student government has, the contracts that we have and the accounts that we fund, and see what is valuable. What are we funding that we maybe are putting too much money behind? How can we cut? Because now is the wrong time to raise student fees on our students here at Iowa State, especially with the way that I think the economy has been. There's a lot of students out there struggling, even just to afford being here at the current rate. And every dollar that we tack on is another dollar and another reason that a student can't attend this campus or pay for food or pay their rent. And so I think it's incredibly important that student government be frugal in the next year and find new ways to fund and do as much as possible with the money that we have now, because now is the wrong time to raise student fees.
Bryce.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with not raising student fees. We still are going through a pandemic. Students are suffering financially, whether that be a lack of resources, job, but Jay and I, if elected, would appoint a finance director who would be in charge of the finance committee, and their job is to manage the money that student government has and figure out where to put that money through to, and what to look back behind, what to back with. So I trust whoever we appoint to know exactly where the money is being spent, and where we can maybe take a step back for a couple years as numbers and enrollment decrease.
So rather than increasing the student fee, do you have any other alternative proposals to meet this challenge, Jacob?
Yeah, I think one of the first places we're going to have to look is at some of the contracts that student government has. Around or just over half of the money that we take in every year is already predetermined spending that will go towards contracts. And so that means if there's a 3 or 5% drop in enrollment, that's a 6 or 10% squeeze on all the student organizations that don't have contracts with us. And so as we're moving into the upcoming years, I think we're going to have to take a look at some of the contracts, especially the larger value ones, and say, is this worth the value that are we getting the value out of this that we're spending the money on for it? And make sure that we're using our student dollars wisely.
Bryce?
Yeah, I agree with Jacob. Like I said before in my last answer, it would be just working a lot with the finance committee and figuring out where the money is being spent, and kind of taking a step back and looking at what's working for us now, what are things that if we pulled out from would affect students or members. So just really taking a step back and figuring out what we can pause on for a year, or yeah.
Recently, the university began providing open education resources, which includes immediate access textbooks that are more cost-effective options for students. According to the Open and Affordable Education Committee at Iowa State, students have saved $6.8 million during the 2020 and 2021 academic year. The current administration has made efforts to increase access to these resources. Have their efforts been successful, and do you see your administration continuing to pursue this cause? Beginning with Bryce.
Yeah, I think even for myself, as a student perspective, I have paid less on textbooks due to immediate access. So I'm very much for, and would continue advocating for expanding that with more professors, more courses. One thing that a different perspective is Jay and I have talked to a few students who aren't always, don't love that the immediate access is automatically taken out of their U-bill, where they would like more of an option when it comes to, trying to find even a cheaper option, whether that's Amazon or something else. But that just is down to perspective. But Jay and I would continue to advocate for that because it is essentially, like you said, saving students a lot more money.
Jacob?
Yeah, I think pushing OERs and pushing immediate access textbooks is actually one of the best ways that we can control the cost of college at Iowa State. Textbook prices are one of the fastest growing parts of the cost of college, and it's one of the things that we can push these low-cost options to reduce the cost for everyone at Iowa State. And so immediate access has been great, and so have OERs. Like you said, over $6 million saved last year alone. And that's one reason why it's on Jaden and I's platform to keep pushing these items. And I think Bryce is right that the fact that it's basically an automatic charge on student accounts is not right. There is a way you can cancel it. You have to go through like 6 different pages, and it's a hassle. And one thing Jaden and I are really interested in doing is working with the administration to simplify that process. But going from there, I think one of the bigger things that we can do is get more open educational resources in more classrooms, because those tend to be a lot cheaper or even free in some cases. And so working with the state government to find funding for grants for OERs is a great way that we could create more textbooks that save students more money.
Graduate students at Iowa State have recently called on the university to specify their status as either university employees or as students. Do you think graduate students should qualify for health and savings benefits as university employees, and how do you plan to advocate for their concerns to the administration? Jacob.
Yeah, I think that they should qualify as employees. Graduate students put a lot of time and effort into their courses and into often being teaching assistants in a lot of undergraduate classes and supporting undergraduate students on this campus. And I think the best way that we can go about supporting them is working with GPSS and finding common ground on how we can support GPSS's efforts to support those students. So, one thing that a lot of graduate students don't know is that student government represents them. And so making sure that they're aware that we're working with GPSS and with graduate student leaders to advocate on their behalf, and that they can also come to us for that support and advocacy is, I think, going to be a very key part of building that alliance to work on that issue.
Bryce.
Could you repeat the question?
Graduate students at Iowa State have recently called on the university to specify their status as either university employees or as students. Do you think graduate students should qualify for health and savings benefits as university employees, and how do you plan to advocate for their concerns to the administration?
Yeah, I would also agree that I think that they should be classified as employees. In my classes the past 2 years that I've gone to Iowa State, I've had numerous graduate students who are putting in a lot of work. Not only are they attending their own classes and doing their own extracurricular things, but they're also attending the classes that they are graduate students for. And a lot of the times they're grading the assessments, they're grading homework and even presenting their own lessons. So I think if they're doing these things, they should be treated as faculty as well. So just working with the administration to back that and making it so they do get that status.
In 2020, the student government introduced the Director of Affordability position within the Executive Cabinet. As a relatively new position, how do you value its effectiveness in meeting its objectives, and is there anything that you would like to change about the position? Beginning with Jacob.
Yeah, so I think the Director of Affordability position has been a great part of student government, and that's actually why I worked with Julia Campbell when she was Director of Affordability to put in the bylaws so that that position would stay year after year to continue supporting affordability on campus. I think one of the things that we've ran into over the years with the position is just making sure that there are maybe some set projects and goals that the director can have. And so I think working very closely with the director and making sure that they have clear goals and initiatives at the start of the year is the best way that we can make sure that position continues to be valuable. And that's why, Jaden and I have an affordability plank in our platform, and there's a lot of projects that we intend to hand off to the director on day one and get them started with that work so that we can fight a lot of the affordability issues that college students are facing right now and continue to make Iowa State an easier place to come to.
Bryce.
I think the position is great. I don't know about Jacob and Jaden, but about all the clubs that we have been to talk to, a question that a lot of students say is, why can't you lower tuition? We can't do that, but we have a director of affordability to advocate for that purpose. At the state legislature, they work with the director of governmental affairs, the legislative ambassadors team, to set those priorities, to go and work with the state legislatures to consider, lowering tuition. I mean, we want, essentially, I think everyone wants the financial burden for students to be lower. So I think, like Jacob said, sitting down with an appointed director of affordability, establishing those goals, establishing those expectations that we have for them, and then working with them throughout the year when they're at the legislature, advocating at the Big 12 conferences. But yeah.
All right, we'll now be moving on to the topic of student government. The Student Government Senate has been subject to high member turnover rates and low member retention from year to year. What does that say about the functionality and inclusivity of student government, and how would you go about creating a solution to this problem? Starting with Bryce.
Yeah, like I said in my opening statement, student government hasn't always been a place where everyone has felt comfortable enough to come in and use their voice and feel like they're being respected and understood. And Jay and I, our slogan, Cultivate Community, we want to change that. There's so many different opportunities, that we can have in, extending outreach to marginalized communities and groups that we don't have representation in, and just creating an environment where we support senators, talking. We want them essentially, to get along, and we want them to stay involved. So just creating an environment where everyone feels like, no matter where they come from or what they think, that everyone respects what they're saying, and we want to know what they're saying.
Jacob.
Right. So last year I actually served as Speaker of the Senate, and so this was something that I dealt with on as a part of my job in leading the Senate, and it's a big challenge, seeing a lot of senators turn over. And I think one of the most effective things that I saw in my role as Speaker in terms of what kept senators around was when they felt motivated and passionate about projects or initiatives, or felt like they were having an actual impact on the community. And so when Jaden and I talk about empowering students, a lot of that empowerment starts in student government. It starts with creating leaders on this campus who have goals, they have a vision for what Iowa State can be, and giving them the tools to do that. And so Jaden and I intend to work very closely with the Senate to give senators those goals and projects and make them feel like they can have an impact on this campus, because when they feel that way and they act that way, they will. And so that's going to be a big priority for us, and I hope that that is a way that we can kind of combat some of the high turnover that we've seen year to year in the Senate.
Following up on that, how would you assess the organizational culture and kind of the overall dynamics that exist between members of the Senate? Bryce.
I'm sorry, can you repeat it?
How would you assess the organizational culture and the overall dynamics that exist between the Senate's members?
The structure of student government isn't always as clear to students who don't know what student government is. And I think that continuing building relationships, even amongst not just Senate, but amongst the different branches, to encourage dialogue between everyone.
Jacob?
Yeah, I think there's definitely divisions within the body, and that comes from a breakdown in communication. And I think that's actually been a really big result of the pandemic from last year, because I was in student government beforehand, and I saw, how we communicated, how we worked together. And so I think one of the things that happened when we were no longer able to be in the same space together in large groups and, hang out for extended periods of time, was that we lost a lot of those connections. And so working to rebuild the environment where everyone feels comfortable with each other, everyone feels comfortable talking about the issues together and finding solutions for the problems facing the student body is going to be a key objective for Jaden and I, and whoever, and we'll be happy to work with the new speaker and vice speaker in the next year to make sure that that happens.
Recent conflicts have resulted in the resignation throughout the 2021 and 2022 term, where senators feel disconnected between leaders and other members of a team. How would you ensure that all viewpoints are heard and are not excluded from the conversation? Beginning with Jacob.
Yeah, so that's a clear example of the breakdown in communication that I was just talking about. There was a breakdown in communication between DEI committee and the speaker, and that led to a delayed nonfeasances being delivered to the speaker. And I'm very sorry, this is all a bunch of jargon for anyone who doesn't care about bylaws, but it led to a situation where we had this what is frankly an uncomfortable situation when the Senate is talking about whether or not to remove you as a senator, and it can feel like an attack on you. And so I think the problem there was the fact that we were not communicating effectively enough with each other. We were not building a organization where everyone feels like they can talk about the problems that they're facing. Because one of the things that came out during that Senate meeting was that the senator was dealing with a lot of personal problems. And that wasn't something that some of the leaders were aware of. And if we had done a better job of building a organization where everyone can talk to each other and be open and honest about those things, I don't think we would have ended up in that situation.
Bryce?
Yeah, it was just a lack of communication amongst all the parties involved. It's hard when you're in a situation where you're sitting amongst your peers and your colleagues. You were elected to serve among these people, and they're talking about removing you essentially from student government. It's an uncomfortable situation, and it's hard not to feel like you're being targeted or it's personal, when frankly it was just more about the bylaws and the rules of the situation. If communication would have been stronger amongst the committee, the individuals, maybe it wouldn't have gotten or escalated or as felt as an attack as what it did. So I just think continuing pushing communication amongst individuals and making sure that everyone feels like what they're saying matters, where you shouldn't be afraid that your colleagues and the people that that you're serving with don't respect what you're saying. So I think just continuing pushing communication and respectful dialogue among the group would help issues like senator retention.
And as a follow-up, do you have any proposals that would ensure better conflict resolution that involves stronger communication to avoid situations like that in the future, beginning with Jacob?
With me? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so I think, one thing that Jaden and I have actually talked about is because, we've lost that sense of community in student government, is holding, events very early in the semester where we kind of invite student government members to come together and bond and kind of get to know one another. Because right now, the only time that student government members really end up in one place where they can kind of set goals together, get to know each other, and build that community is about 4 or 5 months later in the fall at our fall retreat. And so I think hosting a couple different social events and also just being very frank and honest about the community that we want to build straight from the very first Senate meeting is a great way that we can build a student government that works together.
Bryce?
Yeah, one thing that Jay and I want to do is we want to continue outreach to the senators that are seated. So meeting with all of them at least monthly to figure out, what's going on, not only in their senator or their student government roles, but in their personal lives. And like Jacob said, like in every time that we're together, it's like a professional setting. So people don't always feel as becoming vulnerable or being more open to talk about things that aren't strictly business. So just creating more environments and more events like that to make it so students feel like they can not always be so serious all the time.
In the past, when policy concerns have been raised from members of the student body and other branches of student government, students have felt that their concerns go unanswered or are not properly addressed. In general, how will you ensure that concerns are properly addressed and when solutions are found, they are not short-term fixes, but instead they continue to make a positive impact for future students? Bryce.
Again, I think that is also a communication issue. I think you need to continue talking to not only the students, but the people within the organization. I don't know, I can't speak for everyone involved or in student government right now, but just making sure that everyone feels connected and feels like they can share when they're having an issue within the organization, whether that is based on policy or, our bylaws are quite kind of hard to understand, if you don't have experience keeping up with policy, keeping up with bylaws there. So just making it a little bit more clear and making sure that students or the members actually feel like when they're addressing and sharing new ideas or concerns that we actually care and we take it into consideration.
Could you repeat the question real quick?
Yes. In the past, when policy concerns have been raised from members of the student body and other branches of student government, students have felt that their concerns go unanswered or are not properly addressed. In general, how will you ensure that concerns are properly addressed and when solutions are found, they are not short-term fixes, but instead they continue to make a positive impact for future students?
Yeah, so I served in the Senate for 2 years, and I think one of the things that honestly just sucks about being a first-term senator is you just get dropped into the first meeting, you go straight into Robert's Rules, you go through your bills, and it's really disorienting. And there's some things that the leadership does to make sure that you have resources. But one of the things that I really appreciated from my first year in Senate was then President Austin Graber took me to a meeting with my dean and the president of my constituency council and sat me down and connected me with leaders in my community, in my college, and the space that I was supposed to represent. And that's something that Jaden and I would love to replicate in our term, is making sure that senators are connected to administrators in their college, to leaders in their college, and make sure that they know where they can go to best serve their students and connect with them. Because without that resource and without that knowledge, they just end up at the Senate meeting every week and maybe at their committee meeting, but they don't know what's going on in their community, and they cannot effectively represent them.
Student government has been viewed as an echo chamber where there is a lack of active participation from the majority of senators during Senate meetings. How will your administration ensure that the culture within student government allows for rigorous debate and development of new ideas from all senators? Beginning with Bryce.
Can you repeat that?
Student government has been viewed as an echo chamber where there is a lack of active participation from the majority of senators during the Senate meeting. How will your administration ensure that the culture within student government allows for rigorous debate and development of new ideas from all senators?
That starts with working with the senators and making sure, again, I feel like a broken record, making sure that when they speak, they know that what they're saying is respected by everyone, especially by the president and vice president. We want to be open to ideas. We want to listen to what everyone has to say. And I think also what Jacob had stated in the last question is that, new senators just get put, like I've seen throughout I haven't been in the Senate, but I've seen senators get seats throughout the year that necessarily weren't elected, but they sit down in their seat and, they don't entirely know 100% what's going on. So maybe just having meetings with them after they're seated, and just kind of saying, do you have any questions? Is there anything that I can help you with, to provide more insight on how you can get involved in areas that they might be confused about, whether that's in finances or other things that, we can point them in the right direction to who to talk to clarify those questions.
Jacob?
Yeah, I think this goes back to what I said earlier. It starts with empowering members of student government, and in this case, empowering members of the Senate to be leaders in their community. Give them projects and give them the support and tools they need to make the change that they want to make. I've seen, in my time in Senate and in student government as a whole, I've seen senators sit there for weeks and say nothing. But when their project comes up before the Senate, they get very passionate. They get very involved and they get very engaged. And that's a result of the fact that they are suddenly engaged with the process. So finding a way for them to be, constantly engaged with the process, have those projects throughout the year, have that empowerment to go out and lead, I think is the best way that we can make sure that they're engaged in every meeting and speaking up on the bills. Because if they're just seeing this as a meeting that I have to be at for 3 hours on a Wednesday night, then they're not going to say anything. They're going to sit through there. We need to give them things to do and give them the empowerment to do it.
The student government budget in 2021 was $2.6 million and originates from student activity fees, a fee that every student pays as part of their U-bill. With declining enrollment rates, how much of a concern is it for your administration in keeping a balanced budget, and how do you plan to deal with the decreased budget? Jacob.
Yeah, keeping a balanced budget is, incredibly important to us. Student government is sitting on some relatively healthy reserves right now, but one of the things that we don't want to do is eat into those reserves year after year. And the Finance Committee every year goes through a budget balancing process to make sure that the money that we're spending is as close to what's in budget as is possible. And sometimes we'll be over, we'll be under. It kind of depends on how student enrollment falls for the following year. But I think working with the finance director to make sure that we are setting the best priorities possible and working, to review some of the contracts that we're looking at are the best way that we can look at the spending that we're taking, the spending that we're doing, and change it to best represent what students actually want and are getting value out of on this campus.
Bryce?
Yeah, I'm the first person to admit that I'm not as well versed in the numbers and finance world, but Jay has sat on the finance committee throughout this throughout this year as a senator, and I have no doubt that if elected, we will pick a good finance director that we can work closely with in deciding how to budget for and what to budget for, as well as, and that's like I stated a couple topics ago, taking a step back and looking at what is working, what's not working, where the money is being best used for and where we're seeing the most involvement, and then figuring out, what could be cut or dialed back a little bit.
During the second session of the 2021 term, the Senate updated rules regarding Iowa open meeting laws to increase transparency within student government. However, the enforcement mechanism for the rule was absent from the final bill, providing little change to enhance transparency. What would you propose to ensure that all activities within student government that fall under the Iowa open meeting laws are readily available? Beginning with Jacob.
Yeah, so I sat on the committee that actually designed those bylaws over the summer, and I helped draft the bill that was presented in the fall. The enforcement mechanism as it stands is the Attorney General in student government is basically responsible for making sure that meeting minutes are posted, they're posted timely, and they're posted in a place where students can access them. From there, in terms of reporting, if it's a senator that's responsible, they would report to the speaker, and the speaker would kind of take action there based on a non-feasance. If it's a member of the executive branch, they would report to the president, chief of staff, or vice president. But I think there, where it starts, is working with the attorney general to make sure that they know, which pages to check, when our meeting's happening, so that they can make sure that 24 hours in advance the agenda is posted and all that. And making sure that the attorney general has the resources and support necessary to do that, I think is the best way that we can increase the number of agendas and everything that's posted in a timely manner like it's supposed to be.
Bryce?
Yeah. The new rules made it a requirement for all committees within student government that take minutes at their meetings and then have those public, so anyone in the student body can access those and know, oh, I wonder what was happening in Rules Committee, what was happening in Public Relations Committee. But those aren't always as easy access. I think anyone that goes to the website any website doesn't know exactly where to look. So that would be, along with working with the Attorney General to make sure that those are posted, that he's following through with that. But also we're losing a director of IT that has been the director of IT for the past 2 years. So working with the new director of IT and making sure that those are easy for students to find on the website. And then even also working with the PR team and maybe just checking into the social media and saying like, oh, hey, if you want to know what happened in this committee meeting, here's where you can look.
Starting with Bryce, can you provide an overview of your plans to appoint your cabinet members? Are there any positions you would like to add or remove, and why?
Yeah, so Jay and I have had this discussion. It's all about outreach, outreaching to organizations that that we've met and talked to throughout the campaign, working with multicultural organizations to make sure that we are getting all the perspectives necessary to have an effective cabinet. We haven't talked about adding any new cabinet positions, but one thing we are excited is to continue the Campbell-Decker administration's decision to create the director of international student experience. I think our current one has done a phenomenal job, and we're looking forward to finding someone to fill that, which is just, again, would be continuing outreach to organizations so they know that, these positions aren't elected. All you have to do is fill out an application.
Jacob?
Yeah, so I currently serve as the Chief of Staff in Student Government, so I got to work very closely with the current President, Vice President Julia, and Megan on their cabinet search last year. And this year we actually have, I think, 3 more weeks than we had last year to find a cabinet. So one thing that Jaden and I have talked a lot about is just going out and talking to as many leaders in the community of student organizations as possible to invite them to be a part of student government, to step up and serve their community in that larger role. Because in my time in student government, the people who have come from, being a president of a different organization or serving as a treasurer or even just being an at-large at times in student organizations, those people have shown a commitment in the past to lead and to serve their communities. And so we want to talk to as many leaders throughout Iowa State as possible, reach out to multicultural groups, to identity-based organizations, and reach out through the Student Engagement Office and find leaders there to make sure that our cabinet has the best leaders possible to serve students.
Now on to questions relating to the Iowa legislature and local government. According to the City of Ames, in 2018, greenhouse gas emissions for the entire city totaled about 1 million metric tons. As Ames undergoes the Climate Action Plan to reduce carbon emissions, what initiatives would your administration implement to ensure Iowa State is also reducing its carbon footprint? Beginning with Jacob.
Yeah, so, I sit on 3 different city commissions, and one of the ones that I actually sit on right now is I sit on the SciRide Board of Trustees, and I serve as the vice president of that board. And we've actually been in ongoing conversations with the mayor's office and the city council on what exactly the role is that SciRide will play in reducing the city's emissions. And in my conversations with the city manager, SciRide is one of the biggest questions that they have. And actually, just today, SciRide approved at our board meeting a plan to reduce our emissions by, I believe, 20% by 2030, but we know that 83% goal exists. And so we're working with city leaders and with leaders at the state and federal level to find resources to expand that goal and make sure that we can keep up with the city's pace. And I think that's a great role that student government can play, is advocating, through the seats that we have on the SciRide Board of Trustees for that continued push for, more electric buses and making sure that we are reducing emissions in that area that we control with the city.
Bryce?
About 83% of the Ames emission comes from buildings and homes within the city. So I think here, just working with the Student Government Sustainability Committee and working with the city of Ames to ensure that we're educating students that really know, because how many students understand, greenhouse gas emissions? Not a lot. So just continuing education, and so students are aware, students and faculty, and then continuing having a representative, through student government or Iowa State University as a whole on the City of Ames Climate Action Plan.
According to a recent study conducted by the CR Research Group on behalf of the Ames Police Department and ISU Police Department, in 2019, people of color were disproportionately more likely to be arrested by the police in Ames. How could student government and the local police departments work together in order to cultivate equitable law enforcement in Ames? Bryce.
This was a very interesting study. Student government members were invited to the City Hall to hear about the results that came from this traffic stop survey. And even though it was high up for people of color to be arrested in these instances, most of the arrests were because they had to, whether it was a warrant out for their arrest or stuff like that. So just continuing working with not only with the City of Ames, but with ISU PD to continue these, years down the line doing this study again, or continue working with, I know that Chief Newton and the ISU PD does trainings for their officers. So just continuing that those, or making sure that those still exist for incoming officers, current officers.
Jacob?
Yeah, so Bryce is right that there's some reason to believe that data might be off. But regardless, I think one of the things that when you look at the trend in the data, what's most interesting to me is that programs that were implemented to reduce disparities over those years started to show results. And I think looking into more programs over the course of both with ISU PD and with Ames PD to make sure that we continue to educate officers to understand their own biases, so we can be a community where police officers can interact and support all members of the community is the best path forward. So I've served on the ISU PD advisory board for the last 3 years, and I know Chief Newton is very interested in finding more of these programs and more of these educational tools for his officers. And I know Chief Huff with Ames PD is as well. And so, making sure that they know that's a priority for students in the upcoming years is going to be something that Jaden and I work on so that we can continue to watch that disparity drop and hopefully disappear altogether.
The Iowa Board of Regents requested $600 million in state funding for the fiscal year 2023, an increase of $22 million from what was allocated in the last fiscal year. Iowa State has requested about $180 million for the fiscal year 2023. However, Governor Kim Reynolds has only recommended allocating $176 million for the university. Governor Reynolds' recent budget proposal would equate to a deficit around $4 million compared to what the university has requested. How will your administration lobby to state legislators to increase funding to meet the proposed funding levels requested by the Board of Regents? Beginning with Bryce.
I just think that starts with picking a qualified cabinet positions for the Director of Governmental Affairs and Director of Affordability, who will be down at the state legislature during legislative session, advocating to legislators and advocating to the state to increase our funding. I know that Jay and I have a few things on our platform that we want to see an increase in funding for, whether that be mental health services, counseling services. So really one of the only things you can do is advocate and talk to administration, talk to the people at the state legislature, and share, what you're passionate about, what we need money for, and what we're hearing from students. I think that's the number one thing that we can do as leaders.
Jacob?
Yeah, so, I currently work as a clerk in the Iowa House of Representatives, and I see a lot of the conversations that state legislators have about the budget. And, there's a process, whether or not the numbers come out as the governor has requested them is always up in the air. The Senate and the House will have their way with the budget at the end of the day. But the best thing that we can do is tell legislators why they should invest in Iowa State, why it's important to put extra money in mental health, why that means that more ISU students will stay at ISU, finish their degrees, stay in Iowa, and work in the state. When we tell those stories and when legislators hear that, they are a lot more open to funding Iowa State at higher levels and finding more funding for the university. So, one of the best things that I think we can do is tell those student stories, tell what is the value that the legislators are getting out of their investment, and that's what we have to tell them. So, one thing that we've done in the past that's been somewhat effective with legislators is, letter writing campaigns talking about the programs that students are in, the resources that they've been provided.
So this question pertains to who should be responsible for paying for the funding deficit. Reports and data published by the Board of Regents demonstrate that Regent universities are becoming more reliant on tuition revenues and less on state appropriations as funding from state governments continue to decrease. This trend is causing student tuition to increase as the university must raise revenue to deal with these budget shortfalls. Students believe that they should not be the individuals to pay for these budget shortfalls. Should funding for public higher education be secured through state appropriations or donations from private sources? Jacob.
Yeah, so my first year in student government, I actually served as a legislative ambassador. And so that means that I worked with the Director of Governmental Affairs and the co-directors of legislative ambassadors at the time to go down to the Capitol and advocate for student government and for ISU students. And I was on the college affordability team that year. And so one of the things I first did was I went back and looked at what's the situation right now. And over the course of the last 20 or so odd years, the cost of tuition at Iowa State is up about 180%. And state funding is down or flat, just about -5%. And so in that situation, we have to advocate for more funding at the state legislature because I don't think students can continue to support this rapid growth in tuition. And while we wait for the state legislature to find money that they have, there are surpluses, there are, there is money at the state to fund our colleges, and I think we need to continue to advocate for that.
Bryce?
No, I don't think that students should continue to pay more. There's so many students are here, whether that is on loans, through financial aid. So many students that are also working students trying to pay for college and in life. So I think we should be advocating at the legislature for other entities to be taking on that financial burden because our students are already they already have financial burden. I don't think there should be more.
Senate Bill 2042 was recently introduced in the Iowa legislature. This bill would direct Iowa's Regent universities to offer an undergraduate program that does not require students to complete general education courses or any courses that do not relate to the student's major or course of study. Student government is currently undecided on whether to support this bill. Does your administration stand in support or opposition of this bill, and why? Beginning with Bryce.
Jay and I have not discussed whether we're in support or not with this bill. That's tough. I think a lot of knowledge comes out of taking general education classes that you might not have known prior. I think it's an easy way to get you acquainted with college, and so how to function. How to Yeah, I guess I don't have enough information on this specific topic to answer whether Jay and I would support this bill or not.
Jacob?
Yeah, so this is actually a bill that I've been kind of keeping track of in the legislature, and I'm a little bit up in the air on it. I see a lot of value in, I guess, what is commonly referred to as a liberal arts education. I think it's good to know a lot of different things outside of maybe what exactly you specifically want to study, but that's my perspective. And I think one of the things that legislative ambassadors can do a better job of is working with the community and working with students in the community to get a sense of what we're advocating for. Because a lot of times the priorities that we have for legislative ambassadors are thought up in the room. They're not thought up by long conversations with students out in the community. And so I think we could do a lot better of a job of reaching out to students and reaching out to leaders in the community to decide what we want to advocate for. So do we want to advocate for, educational programs where you don't have to take chemistry because you're a marketing major? I don't know that answer because we haven't done the work. And so I think that's something that we have to do in the next years. See what students actually want out of this university. Do they want that option? And if so, can we make it happen for them?
House File 2176 is a bill introduced this legislative session that would ban the dissemination of, quote, obscene material to minors by K-12 school libraries and public libraries. Penalties for educators could include fines and even jail time. This legislation goes against the American Library Association's Bill of Rights. Multiple school districts in Iowa are considering removing books that explore themes of sexuality, gender, and race. In particular, LGBTQIA+ books have faced increased threat of removal by school boards. What message does this send to the LGBTQIA+ community here on campus, and what impact could it have on the campus community as a whole? Bryce.
Disbanding books like this in schools and legislation supporting a bill like this sends a message to the LGBTQIA community here at Iowa State and the entire state of Iowa that they simply, that the people that are supposed to be representing them don't care about them. I think it's important for books about LGBTQIA, racism, people of color is necessary because, especially in small town Iowa, people that come to university that don't have any experience with any type of diversity at all, this is taking that away from them. And I think it wakes a lot of people up coming to a school where they're surrounded with diversity. And I think it's kind of a slap in the face to people that identify within these communities. And I think it's an outrageous bill.
Jacob.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an example of people who are in favor of free speech until someone says something they don't like. I think college and school, it's about broadening your horizons. It's about confronting the ideas that may not be your own, that you might not hold. It's important for everyone to, go out and interact with new cultures, new ideas, and grow in that way, because I think if we all come here and all we hear for 4 years is, I guess, whatever we heard the previous 13 years in high school, we're not growing, we're not learning, then your education isn't that valuable. I think it's really important that, I'm opposed to this bill, and I think it's important that libraries be allowed to offer these resources and these books to students. I don't think they cause any harm to anyone in our community, and all I think they do is add value and create an opportunity for education about different cultures and identities.
Senate File 2342 is a bill that would require transgender students to participate in school-sanctioned sports in K-12 community college and Iowa's Regent universities based on their sex assigned at birth rather than their gender identity. Does your administration support or oppose this bill, and why? Beginning with Jacob.
Yeah, this is it's something that just recently passed through the House, and I'm not in favor of the bill. I think, going after people for their identities and choosing to kind of select out these small groups of people and punish them because you don't agree with the way they live their lives is not, that's not reflective of the values that I want this state to hold or I want Iowa State to hold. So, it's not something I'm in favor of, and I hope that, maybe as the process goes on, the bill might die in the Senate, though. That's up to them, I suppose. But yeah, I think this is the exact type of thing that, we have to oppose, from a student perspective with our legislative ambassadors and with our leaders, and demonstrate that this isn't what, students want at Iowa State University. We want a community of inclusion. We want a community where everyone can, live their truth and their identity.
Bryce.
Yeah, I'm not in support of this bill. Everything that Jacob said, I agree with wholeheartedly. I think this bill is trying to, silence individuals who are transgender, and I think it's important for us as leaders to get that perspective from students or, people that are being affected by this bill. I think it just makes it gives people another reason to feel beat down. It already is hard to come out to a society that might not be as accepting as you, and you want that love, you want that acceptance. And when bills like this are introduced at any type of legislature, it just continues to belittle these people, and it's frankly sad. But yeah, shortly, no, I don't agree with this bill.
All right, we'll now move on to the next section. It is campaign-specific questions for each candidate, starting with Jacob. Your campaign has released a detailed policy document explaining your plans if elected. How will you incorporate student input into your platform and make sure your initiatives are meaningful to students?
Yeah, so I mean, Jaden and I have some pretty detailed thoughts. I mean, if you go to our campaign page at the very bottom, there's a link to the document. You can read it yourself. But obviously, throughout this whole process, one of the things we really want to do is continue to engage student leaders at all stages, as we're trying to implement these plans. Because we have ideas. We've sat down with leaders in the communities. We've sat down with leaders in the Iowa State University administration and talked through some of these things, and we've got an outline. But we don't have all the hard facts. We don't have all the hard details, and that's what is going to be a big part of implementing the policy. And so, when we're talking about food insecurity, for instance, that means sitting down with SHOP. That means sitting down with ISU Dining and their Give a Swipe program, the leaders on these issues right now, and making sure they are part of the solutions that we find for supporting those students through that challenge. And that's something that we want to replicate with every platform item. We want to find leaders in the community and bring them into the process so that we are constantly getting that feedback from people who are outside of student government and may have a different perspective than our own.
Question for Bryce. In past elections, executive slates have released a thorough policy outlines detailing their plans if elected. Currently, your campaign has released platform goals but has not specified the actions that are needed to achieve them. Do you plan to release a more comprehensive plan outlining the specific steps to accomplish these goals, and how do you plan to implement the goals?
Yeah, so when we initially announced our platform, we intentionally left it broad. We intentionally left room for student perspective when we were going to clubs. We've been to over 30 clubs throughout this month, and we've continued to add things to our list, continue to strengthen that. We've released throughout the last couple of weeks, we have spotlighted each individual of the three, and we included information on how we want to do that, what organizations we wanted to work with to reach some of those goals. So I don't have enough time to go into each single one, but if you want to go to our social media, we have definitely laid out more actionable items because we intentionally left the beginning broad.
We'll now go back to Jacob. One of your campaign goals is to double the Green Initiatives Fund from $15,000 to $30,000 to expand sustainable projects on campus. Sustainability projects that are currently over the $15,000 threshold are already funded through the Special Projects account. What do you hope to accomplish with the reallocation of funding from the Special Projects account to the Green Initiatives Fund?
Yeah, so I mean, the great part about doubling the amount in the account is that it actually won't cost students any more money because all that money is reserve money, so money that's left over from previous years. So that amount will only ever be filled if we have the money to pay for it. And so what we hope to achieve by taking it out of the Special Projects account and specifically setting it in green initiatives is that there is a much more simplified approval process for getting money out of the Green Initiatives account. You only have to go through the Sustainability Committee and then just get a sign-off from Finance, which is a little bit faster than the current process with Senate bills. So it'll give the Sustainability Committee more flexibility to do large-scale projects in the community without costing students more money. The amount that we're proposing to increase it to is actually pretty reflective of the amount we've spent in previous years. And so I think rather than going hand in hand to the Senate every year, with some large project, we might as well just give the money to the committee and let them do what they were going to do anyways.
Back to Bryce. Increasing scholarship opportunities in higher education is one of your campaign platform points. How do you plan to accomplish this with less funding from the state in the coming fiscal year?
I think it's just important, like I've stated, working with our Director of Affordability and Director of Governmental Affairs to just prioritize an increase in funding for scholarships, specifically for things like law school and other graduate programs, because those are very expensive. And the fact that some of those are so expensive turn a lot of, whether they're, first generation college students or whatever, to pursue those things because they just can't afford to at that time. So then again, that's just talking to the legislatures and telling them what is important and continuing to just advocate. And with the like you said, the dollars going down, just moving money around and just showing that that is kind of a priority for us.
Back to Jacob. Much of your campaign has been focused around maintaining or building upon current policies. Can you explain other potential policy directions that may differ from the current administration's goals?
Could you repeat the question quick? I'm sorry.
Much of your campaign has been focused around maintaining or building upon current policies. Can you explain other potential policy directions that may differ from the current administration's goals?
Yeah, so, there are definitely things in our platform that, are ongoing things in student government. We talk about getting more funding through the state legislature for mental health. We talk about, more funding and support for organizations like SHOP to combat, combat food insecurity on campus. And so I think, when we're looking at our platform and some of the reasons that we selected those, topic areas and issues is because they continue to be ongoing problems. And so what Jaden and I tried to do was offer new solutions to those problems and make sure that, when we're looking at food insecurity, are we looking at options beyond just giving more money to SHOP? Are we looking at options beyond just getting them set up through assets? So like one thing that we've talked about with the wellness director in the health and wellness division is getting more students engaged with the SNAP program and access to food stamps, because there's a lot of students who qualify for it but don't use it. And so we want, that's an example, I guess, of a different policy initiative that we would be pursuing.
This question's for Bryce. Your campaign outlines expanding on LGBTQIA+ allyship. How do you plan to encourage more participation and perspectives in the Diversity Inclusion Committee and the student government as a whole?
That's all. I mean, our campaign is based around cultivating a community, and we want a community with every perspective possible. So that is, whether that's sitting down with the center and doing PR is my thing. So sitting down with the center and doing a fireside chat that outlines all of the different stuff that the center adds or has for students that identify within these communities, and making sure that those are accessible to students, but also going to organizations like the Pride Alliance and stuff like that, and making sure that they know that student government's here and we want to know how they're feeling, where they're at. We're advocating for all students and just encouraging them, their spots on, not just the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, their perspectives on all of the committees and Senate and Cabinet. So that is just going to them and ourselves and telling them we want your opinions.
Last question for Jacob. In your campaign platform, you mentioned that there are difficulties for international students when searching for career opportunities such as internships and post-graduation employment. What are the current barriers for international students, and what does your administration envision as an effective support system?
Yeah, I think there are two, there's a number of barriers, but I think the two clear ones is first, there are a lot of companies that just will not hire international students. You check that, not a U.S. citizen box on SciHire, and they just kind of don't consider your application because they don't want to go through the work of sponsoring your work visa and some of the additional steps that they have to go through. And then I think the other one is just the fact that there aren't a lot of resources out there to support international students on these issues. And so, you go to the ISSO website and go to the career tabs, and they either point you back to the colleges, or they point you to a 3-page info sheet that I think, frankly, is not enough to support these students. And so that's why Jaden and I are advocating for creating a coordinator position to work with the International Students and Scholars Office and work with career services offices so that international students can have the same level of career support that domestic students get, so that they can get an internship while they're here or find a full-time job when they leave. They pay more than general ISU students, and I think they should get the same services at the minimum.
Back to Bryce. Your platform mentioned a leadership group that would build a greater connection with presidents of academic and cultural organizations to students. Is the goal of this initiative to connect with presidents of student organizations or to connect student government with the general student body?
Both. I think that it would benefit both student government and these organizations to have this leadership group. So what this leadership group would look like, it would be presidents from every college council and multicultural council that would come together at least once a month and share what's happening in their college, what's happening in their council organization, and then either us as president and vice president or other presidents of councils can point the others in the right direction of where they need to go if they're having an issue, who they should talk to, and then also encouraging them to talk to their councils about, we have so many open seats. There's so many positions within student government that are available to everyone. So just sending back with them opportunities for them to share with their councils on how to get involved in student government.
And as a follow-up, Bryce, this idea is similar to the fireside chats that inform students through interviews with different departments campus-wide. How is your program different, and do you intend to run these programs concurrently or just one?
Can you repeat that?
This idea is similar to the fireside chats that inform students through interviews with different departments campus-wide. How is your program different, and do you intend to replace the fireside chat program or run them concurrently?
Well, the fireside chat haven't been, active this year, but it's very different. It's a leadership group that meets similar, like in an actual meeting, to bounce ideas off each other, to share with each other what's happening within our respective organizations. So it's very different than the fireside chat that happens with like offices and administration, compared to this is with actual students who are representing their college on the council.
All right, we are now going into a 10-minute intermission where we will collect questions from the audience. To submit questions, you can scan the QR code that will be posted on the screen during our break. That QR code will take you to a Google form where you can submit questions to individual candidates or both candidates. You can also access the Google form on the Election Commission website, and the link will also be posted in the description of the YouTube video. When we return, we'll be asking the candidates questions that have been submitted by the student body, and we will end with closing statements. So we'll be back shortly. not too much more. We will be asking questions that have been submitted by the student body. Some questions have been submitted for both candidates, some individual candidates. This is for both Jacob and Bryce. Student government currently funds extracurricular events from ISU lectures, student union board, After Dark, and others. Do you have any proposals to increase the fun student activity fees that are offered on campus? Jacob.
Yeah, so I actually currently sit on the lectures committee. I am one of the co-chairs of the committee, and so I see a lot of value in the services that lectures provides. And Christian Grandsteiner, who's on my campaign, is a member of SUB, and so I see a lot of value there. With the budget constraints, I don't know that I see. I don't have any intentions to increase those budgets. I think we're going to have to be pretty frugal in the next year. But I think working with those organizations to find new routes of funding so that they can continue to provide the amazing and fantastic services that they give students and the experience that they create here at Iowa State is going to be a big priority for us. I know Lectures is looking into finding additional funding from the foundation. I know SUB is looking into some new funding routes. And supporting them in those initiatives is, I think, a great thing that student government can do to continue to empower these organizations to be great, parts of our community without, increasing the amount of money that we have to take from students to do so.
Bryce?
Yeah, I agree. I think all of these areas of campus are things to further student involvement. I've been to a few lectures. It's a great program. I'm glad that we put money into these programs. Jay has served on the finance committee throughout this whole year. He's been through allocations process or currently going through. So I trust working with him and our finance director to decide, where that fits into the budget. I don't have a opinion at this time whether increasing funding for these organizations, but it's a possibility just depending on budget.
Another question for both candidates. What is your experience with diversity and inclusion, and how do you plan to increase outreach and representation in student government next year? Jacob.
So I've worked on a number of different DEI projects over the years. A couple years ago when there were some racist vandalisms in Joffrey Hall, I worked with student leaders in student government and with leaders in the DOR to make sure that students had the support and had access to information, knew what DOR was working to helping, what DOR was doing to help them and serve them in response to that. But I've also done other things like this last year. I've had the opportunity to sit in on monthly meetings with International Student Council executives and really hear from those students about what's going on in the international student community and how we can best serve them. And that's something I'd love to replicate with other multicultural organizations and identity-based groups, because one thing I've learned is that, we are able to do so much more for international students because we know what's going on in their community. So I think replicating that with other communities is a great way that student government could do a better job of serving students.
Bryce.
Yeah. I came out as gay in a small town Iowa going to a Catholic school. So I believe that all those experiences that I have been through regarding this have prepared me for conversations with multicultural organizations. Even though my experiences are very different than people of color and those, I believe that the experiences that I have had have prepared me with working with these students and really listening to other perspectives and listening to what other people have gone through. I think it's important to take the experiences that you have gone through and working with other students and making and uplifting those voices, which is why expanding LGBTQIA is such a point on my platform. Is I want students to know that there are resources on campus because not everyone is out when they come to college, and they don't know that the center exists for them. So I think that those experiences alone have really prepared me for tackling all things diversity.
This question's for both candidates. A big problem that's been discussed tonight is student government outreach. What has your campaign done so far regarding outreach to students and student organizations? Bryce.
Yeah, like I said earlier in the debate, Jay and I have been to over 30 organizations on campus. Our whole point of the platform is cultivating community and continuing that outreach. In my role as director of marketing, I have worked with many different organizations and places on campus to do that. And I've helped plan multicultural town halls. I've helped to do these things. So just continuing that outreach and pushing for more involvement in those organizations is something that has been at the forefront of our entire campaign.
Jacob.
Yeah, so by the end of this campaign, Jaden and I will have visited near or over 70 student organizations. We have had such a great time going out there and talking with students, and every time we finish a presentation, the question we ask is, we love to hear questions about our platform, but we also want to know what's going on in your community. What can student government do for you? Because our 12 points is not the sole total of everything that we want to do on campus. We want to serve students, and that involves taking their ideas in and hearing what their problems are. And so, that's just been a really great experience for us, and hearing about some of the different challenges that students are facing throughout the ISU community. And I think that's something that we'd like to try and replicate in some way, continuing to have that outreach and engage with student organizations throughout our term, so that we can continue to be aware of what's actually going on in the community rather than, I guess, just guessing.
What will be your #1 priority if elected? Bryce.
Jay and I, our #1 goal is we want every single seat in student government filled. I mean, we have over 100 seats available, and they're rarely ever all filled. And I think sometimes people get scared to join student government because they think they have to run or get elected, when odds are there are more positions within student government that are not elected than there are elected. So I think just pushing for more involvement and making sure that organizations and students know that there's so many different opportunities for them to get involved in. So Jay and I's #1 goal is to continue in that outreach and working with all organizations, multicultural organizations, to making sure that we are bringing every perspective from every part of campus to the table when Jay and I are making decisions, or the cabinet, or the Senate.
Student government allocates over $2 million in funds, but has rules regarding eligibility for this funding. How would you alter student government funding requirements to better reflect initiatives the student body wants to see funded, such as the ISU Blood Drive? Jacob.
Could you repeat that question quick?
Student government allocates over $2 million in funds, but has rules regarding eligibility for this funding. How would you alter student government funding requirements to better reflect the initiatives that the student body wants to see funded, such as the ISU Blood Drive?
Yeah, again, this has to be a conversation with the community about what our priorities and criteria are, and that's the document that decides how we are able to fund things. Similar to how I talked about earlier, that we have to do outreach and talk to people when we're setting our legislative priorities. We also have to do the same thing when we're talking about funding, because this year we struggled to fund SHOP because our priorities and criteria weren't very clear on whether or not we could support a food bank on campus. And so, those are the types of conversations that Jaden and I want to go out and have in the community. What do you want to see different from student government in terms of how we support this community? That's a conversation we need to have with all kinds of students all across this campus. Otherwise, it's just 30 people in a room on a Wednesday night taking a guess and trying to do their best. And I think they do good work, but we're uninformed, I think, in the discussion. And so outreach has to be a key part of that strategy.
Bryce?
Yeah, that's the whole thing that Jay and I have been doing throughout the last couple weeks campaigning, is we've been talking to students and asking them what they're passionate about. When we decided, and when we picked our platform and picked the different areas that we wanted to, fight for, that what it was. We took our passions and we took students' passions and mixed them together. So that would just, again, be working with the finance director and the finance committee on advocating for things that are not only important to student government members, but are important to all of the students.
How do you feel about the decision to put pronouns on the names of plaques for senators? Should senators and executive boards require to include pronouns on the name of plaques? And what message does this convey to the student body at large? Jacob.
Yeah, so, my pronouns are on my email, on my placard, on my name tag for student government. I think it's a really easy way to be inclusive, to, tell students that, they can choose the identity that they want to have and, kind of open that door of communication. I don't know that, I don't know that I would be in favor of forcing or mandating that every member of student government put their pronouns on their placards. I think that's a pretty personal choice, especially for those who might not, want to share their pronouns. And so I think, just continuing to educate and building a community of inclusion in student government, teaching people about why it's a good thing to put your pronouns on your placard and share those with people, is a really easy way that we can continue to build a student government that is more inclusive of all identities.
Bryce.
When you put your pronouns on your placards, essentially you are informing everyone else how you want to be addressed, and I think that is important. I do agree with Jacob. I don't think that it should be a mandatory thing, because you're always going to have those people that refuse or just simply don't understand why they should or have to do it. I think doing it provides an inclusive environment. It makes people feel more comfortable. Some people might not always be comfortable sharing how they identify or how they want to be addressed. So I think when other people do it, it kind of provides other students an opportunity to be like, hey, they're doing it, so this is a place where I am free to share mine without the fear of judgment.
For students that don't know you, can you please describe the involvement you have had within student government and why your experience makes you the candidate that students should vote for? This is for both candidates. We'll start with Bryce.
Yeah, so last year I served on the Election Commission, I joined right as election season started, so I got to experience all of that. But then I got appointed to Director of Marketing, which is a first-time position within student government. That encompasses managing all the social media, helping with the PR things. But then other things I do is I served as an asset liaison this year, which I think is one of the most exciting things that I did, which is, if you don't know what asset is, it's the process where nonprofit organizations within Story County get their funding from different funders, student government, City of Ames, the county, and United Way. And so I got the chance to be a liaison to an organization and just support and advocate for organizations to get funding from the different things. And I think that has been very eye-opening.
Jacob?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been involved in organizations throughout our community essentially since I came to Iowa State. I first joined student government as a legislative ambassador, and so there I worked to lobby for students down at the state capitol. I later was elected to the Senate, served there for 2 terms, 1 term as the speaker, where I helped lead that body, through our first year back in COVID. And this year I've served as the chief of staff for Julia and Megan, and so I've helped them manage their cabinet. And on top of that, I serve on 3 different city commissions, and so I've worked really closely with a lot of city leaders. But I guess the summation of all that is that I've been in the room. I've been working on these projects. I've been working to serve students basically since my 3rd week at Iowa State. And that is the experience that I want to take to the meetings, with administrators, with student leaders, is that I've seen how we can fix things. I've seen how we can make a campus that works better for everyone. And that's what I want to spend my next year doing. I want to make Iowa State a better place.
This question's for both candidates. What do you see as the most challenging aspect of representing all members of a diverse student body? Beginning with Bryce.
I think the most challenging thing is, being vulnerable and being open to understanding all different perspectives. Iowa State is home to people from every state in the United States, every county in Iowa, different countries. So I think the most important thing is just sitting down with people from these different communities and completely understanding their perspective. And that takes a lot. You need to sit down and have an open mind. And having an open mind, for some people, always isn't the easiest thing to do. But I do have an open mind, and I'm very excited to speak and meet with people from all walks of life.
Jacob?
Yeah, Bryce is right. We've got people from all over the country, and I mean from over, I think, 110 countries represented here at Iowa State. And so, I think I see the real big challenge is just time. One of the things I talked about earlier is the opportunity that I've had to sit down monthly with International Student Council executive leaders and leaders in that community. And I think that's been really educational. That's, that has illuminated how I can better serve those students. And so that's something I want to replicate with other groups around campus and other communities. And so, it's definitely going to take a lot of time, but I think Jaden and I are prepared to do the work, prepared to go out there and give it our all and meet with as many student leaders as possible so that we can, when we go into the meetings with Wendy Winterstein or Pam Kane or Toya Younger, we have the information and we know what students are asking for and how we can best serve them.
This student has a question for both of you and wants to know, will you be involved in student government if you are not elected? Jacob.
Yeah, I would love to, if I'm not elected, I would love to find some other ways to serve. I currently serve on the SciRide Board of Trustees, and I serve as the vice president there. I'd love to continue representing student interests in that capacity. And there's some university committees that I've been involved with since before I technically joined student government, and so I'd love to maybe come back to those. And if there's other paths or opportunities to serve students, I'm interested. This is not the only path for me. I like serving my community. I see a lot of value in it. It gives me a lot of, I can't think of the word right now, I'm sorry, but public service to me is important. And so I want to keep doing that in whatever capacity I possibly can. So whatever route is open to me is a route I'll take to serve students and our community.
Bryce?
Yeah, I've loved being a part of the cabinet this year. I think Megan and Julie have done a great job, and it's been fun. I like to say that, Jacob and I we've worked together out this whole year, that it would be fun either way to be involved in student government. My passion is local government, and so I serve as the chair for the Campus and Community Commission, so I would love to continue doing that. But definitely, if, Jacob and Jaden win, I love student government, I love serving students, so I would definitely continue being involved.
This question's for both candidates. Would your administration have any initiatives it would like to work on with the city? If so, what are actionable steps you would like to take to ensure results? Bryce.
Yeah, so you said with the city, correct? Yeah. So as I stated last question, I serve as the chair for the Campus and Community Commission. What this commission does is it works with this. It takes representatives from Iowa State University, the community, and downtown Ames to help create a better environment for the city and for people that aren't from Ames that are coming and moving here. One thing that we worked on was establishing renter's guide for people that are first-time renters and knowing where to look. A lot of the times it's the first time students have had to pay bills, when they move into an apartment or a house. So in our platform, I want to work with the city of Ames to strengthen education related to the city of Ames recycling, creating a easy guide for off-campus students to know exactly where to take things, when they're living in houses, whether that be old furniture, old appliances, but students don't always know that there's a place for that or a phone number to call. So just making sure that resources are available to them.
Jacob?
Yeah, I think the city is a key partner for student government and for the student body. I currently sit on 3 different city commissions, so I get to interact with the city manager, members of the city council, and work with people like the mayor on a number of different projects. So things like SciRide and working with them to expand electric buses and in our fleet is going to be very important. But I think, other issues where we might not commonly look to the city, like issues of food insecurity on campus, I think there are great partnerships that we can build with the city and with the county as a whole through programs like Asset, which is a joint operation between student government, the county, United Way, and the city of Ames. And so I think there's a bunch of different ways that we can look to the broader community, the Ames community, and find partners for the issues that we're facing and the challenges we're facing on campus and the support that we need to meet those challenges.
Bryce, you can respond.
Yeah, so it was just something that I wanted to add. Besides the city, I work as an intern for the county. County government is my passion. I love, it's overlooked by a lot of students. So the current student government members are preparing a committee called the Public Affairs Committee, and I'm really excited to kind of intertwine the county in that because, the county supervisors, they make a lot of decisions that not only affect the Ames, but, students as a whole. So I just want to encourage students to be involved in the county as well.
All right, this is the last question for both candidates. What is your favorite thing about Iowa State, and what is one thing you would like to change? Starting with Bryce.
My favorite thing about Iowa State is I came from a very small town that was very close-knit, and although there's so many students on campus, I still feel like I'm at home. Ames still feels like an environment where it reminds me of home. It gives the small town vibes, and I love being here. I like to call it home now, but I don't know if I really have something essentially that I would change in regards to the university.
Jacob, same question.
Yeah, for me, it's the people that I've met here. I've just constantly, in every room I go into, I am astonished by the amazing and unique perspectives that different students have to offer. And my experience at Iowa State would be nothing without the people that I know here, without the friends that I've made, without the classes that I've been in, and the conversations that I've had with 1,000 different students over the years. That has been such I think, getting out and experiencing different people and different cultures has been just so fantastic for me. And in terms of things that, I guess I'd want to change, I want to make sure that students have the ability to have that experience, because I've been really fortunate to have a lot of those experiences, to have the time to go out to different meetings, to different events, and to meet all these people and be involved in all these things. And that's not something that every student gets the chance to do. And that's why when Jaden and I talk about, empowering students, we want to give the students the tools and opportunity to do that. So yeah, I guess that's what I would change.
We'll now go into closing statements. The candidates will each have 90 seconds to make closing statements, starting with Bryce.
Yeah, again, I would just like to extend a huge thank you to the Election Commission for all of the work you put into this debate, as well as the whole election process. Thank the Iowa State Daily for assisting tonight, and most importantly, thank the students, my campaign team, for all the help that they've done getting us here tonight. It has been an honor to stand before you and share about how Jay and I plan to cultivate a community on Iowa State's campus. Through dedication, empathy, listening, and understanding, Jay and I believe we can bring all Cyclone perspectives to our table. Vote for Bryce and Jay on March 1st and 2nd for the student body president and vice president, and together we can cultivate communities of opportunity, togetherness, and collaboration. Thank you.
Jacob?
Yeah, so my first day at Iowa State, I actually by chance ran into Wendy Winterstein on the sidewalks outside of Carver Hall. She actually stopped me and asked how I was enjoying IESU, and I responded, without knowing who she was, I love it. How are you enjoying Iowa State? And she laughed, smiled, and said that she loved it too. I tell that story because all these years later, I'm super happy to say that I still love it here, that I've had so many wonderful and amazing experiences that I never could have imagined that August afternoon. But I know that feeling isn't universal, and I know that there are students out there struggling with all kinds of things, like money, mental health, or just trying to find a sense of belonging in our community. And so when Jaden and I talk about empowering students through increasing affordability, investing in sustainability, supporting our community, and prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, what we're talking about is creating a campus where everyone has the opportunity and tools to grow, thrive, and have the same positive experience that Jaden and I hold so dear. That's what our platform is about. It's more than the collection of empty promises, buzzwords, and feel-good phrases that I think we've grown too used to hearing from student government. It's a collection of real, tangible steps that we can take together to better our community. So I hope that you'll vote Ludwig Ulrich this March 1st and 2nd to empower students at Iowa State. Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause for the candidates. All right, this brings us to the end of the 2022 presidential debate. Thank you to both campaigns for attending tonight, and thank you to the members of the Election Commission and Iowa State Daily, as well as the MU technical staff that helped in preparation for this event. Make sure to cast your vote in the 2022 student government elections. Voting days are March 1st and 2nd. It's next Tuesday and Wednesday. All Iowa State students will receive an email with the link to vote. So thank you again to everyone involved. Have a great night.